It's game day, Dave.
For your team, yes, it is. It is the beginning of week 1.
You know what that is?
I just threw up in my mouth.
That's the sound of the champs about to take their march back to defend the national championship.
Well, as your coach says, though, you don't defend the national championship. You just go for the next one.
That is correct. You know, it's next man up mentality.
Yep.
With my Clemson Tigers, we are no longer a rebuild. It's just reload, baby.
And you guys are locked and loaded. That is for sure based off all the recruiting.
We're just going to let the rag play out till the end of this reprise. S-O-N. All right, I'll cut it there. Good morning. It is week 1 begins today. We actually have several games on the slate.
I'd love to go on a rant right now because we're at both ends of the spectrum. He's like a kid in a candy store smiling, and all I keep getting is weather reports on Dorian going to maybe mess up my Florida State game for the weekend against Boise State. But Clemson is a great, great place to start, obviously, because they are the kings of the mountain from last year and don't look to be slowing down anytime soon. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. And, you know, not just this game, because I think a lot of the implications we'll talk about are going to echo through the season. But you start off against used to be a nemesis for you guys. I've actually been to a game with you back in the Calvin Johnson days where they would give you guys a hard time. But this is a very, very different Georgia Tech team, not in personnel, but definitely in where they're going for the future. So why don't you just give me your opening thoughts on how you feel? Let's stay in the vein of Georgia Tech. Let's not get the Clemson overall, and then we'll kind of start breaking down some of the roster and you know how you feel like you guys are going to approach this game and then the season.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm excited because it's a big game right out the gate for us in terms of a conference game as opposed to we'll usually take on Furman or somebody like that at the beginning of the year. So,
Furry man.
a little part of me is sad I'm not up there today, but, you know, dad responsibilities. Here's the deal. Chip Kelly, great coach, took over at UCLA, runs a very specific type of offense, took over last year at UCLA. They were bad. A lot of that has to do with the personnel that was left behind for him to pick up, and that personnel, quite frankly, doesn't run the offense he wants to run, at least exactly. He needs to get his guys in there. Here we are with Georgia Tech. Same scenario, really. Paul Johnson's offense was very specific in the triple option.
Yep.
The players that were recruited to that school, sure, they weren't always like 4 and 5 star, very few were, but they succeeded because they were handpicked for that offense by Paul Johnson. And the past several years, despite the record, Georgia Tech has been one of the leaders in the country at the end of the season in rushing because of the triple option.
Sure.
Here we are with the new coach. From my understanding, he wants to go Jeff Collins, first season. Let me start by this. As a Clemson fan, and from everything I hear, the biggest thing I wonder about is what are we going to see?
Yep.
There's no tape. You really can't find any. We don't know exactly what we're going to see. If they're going to go spread offense, fine. But just like Chip Kelly when he inherited UCLA, Coach Collins is inheriting Paul Johnson's triple option players. A 180 from the spread offense that he wants to run.
Correct.
That said, there is a question mark. As a Clemson fan, does it make me nervous? No. I know we have the horses. I know, our vaunted D-line is gone. We have guys that you will learn quickly about tonight, and we'll talk a little bit about them. But there is a question mark. If I were to say, something that concerns me, It's the fact that we don't really know what we're going to see from the Georgia Tech offense. So that said, look, their offensive line were recruited there for the triple option offense. This is where it's going to hurt them the most because they're not big guys. They're cut block guys made for the run block, a spread option. These guys are going to have to stand up and give some protection to the quarterback or whoever's in the backfield. Honestly, I think we talked a few minutes ago. They'd be wise to incorporate a read option before going complete spread because they have all those runners there. So I think that the offensive line being built for a run attack, a spread option, cut blocking, it's going to be trouble for them tonight because when number 3, Xavier Thomas, comes off the edge, they're not going to have, 1, the speed, and 2, this maybe should be 1, the strength. They're going to get pushed back, pushed on their back, run by. So we'll see. So that's we'll start with that. From the Georgia Tech side. Question mark. What are we going to see there with their offense?
Yeah, I think what is interesting is, when you talk about spread concepts versus the triple option, and you talked about the cut blocking and that, but it's also a much tighter formation. Whereas when you spread out your offensive line, because in a spread option you're going with multiple receiver sets, and you generally spread out your offensive line, and they have to be willing to take guys on one-on-one, which is going to be an interesting matchup. Especially, we can talk about all that Clemson lost, but we've seen the recruiting over the last few years and seen the guys that they brought in. So there's going to be some serious matchups there. Now, I will say this. We're going to find out the salt of this coach pretty quickly because the best coaches in football know how to adapt to their players. So, and that is not being a system guy. And that was always the challenge of Paul Johnson. And you said, he had some success. Georgia Tech's had a very simple principle in beating them, especially on the offensive side of the ball, is if they were up by 2 scores, you were in trouble.
Yep.
They could turn a game into an hour and 45 minutes by running the clock out, and they'd punish you that way. They're built on misdirection from the past, and so you had to tackle exceptionally well against them.
You have to be in the triple option, very disciplined. Play your assignment, control your gap, and I'll tell you that for the Clemson Tigers, Georgia Tech's on the Coastal, and they are our rivals, so to speak, on the Coastal.
Sure.
We play them every year.
Yep.
And
it's a close rivalry, 2 hours.
And every year we would spend, from my research in the past, at least a week during summer camp. It didn't matter. We usually didn't play Tech the first game. It was usually early, maybe mid-season, but it was never really the first game. Regardless, we would prepare at least 1 full week over the summer camp for the triple option offense because preparing the week of is not going to get it done.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting, and I'll use a Florida State example with Kendall Briles and, where you feel about him personally, and I think everybody's kind of got a feel for that, and especially Florida State fans. One thing about him is he has, everywhere he's gone, put up at least 100 more yards on offense per game, and he's also doubled the scoring. So, and why that's important in this conversation is that's a coach that's going out and figuring out the way to maximize the talent, and in some cases where he's been is talent deficient, and being able to cover the weaknesses and exploit the strengths of an offense. So the question will be whether he can do that to a point with the players that he's got. And he's got to win games because if he wants to recruit for this, he's going to have to win some games. So his ability to be flexible and have some ingenuity in what he's doing is going to be critical tonight against Clemson. Again, I said it last week in week 0. it is overreaction in the first week. If they can keep this game reasonable into the second half, I think that's a big win for Georgia Tech. And like you said, it's, guys are chomping at the bit to go at it. And the thing about Clemson is a lot of these guys, though they're not the names from last year on defense, they got a lot of playing time on a very good team. Dabo and Venables play their guys. So I think I don't think it's a surprise to anyone. It's been talked about. It's going to be what Georgia Tech can do offensively against Clemson's lesser-known defense as compared to the offense. I mean, I've heard it over and over again. The offense, everybody knows what your offense is. It isn't different. You got massive talent on the outside. You've got a running back that can do it himself, and then you got Trevor Lawrence.
Well, and our offensive line is really good. It's really good. Here's something to take note of. Georgia Tech's roster, as I see it now, and it might be adjusted in terms of where they're at today, but as I see it now, they have 6 quarterbacks, 11 running backs, and 9 tight ends. Now, they do show about 11, 12 wide receivers, but that just goes to show you. I mean, how many programs in college football carry 11 running backs, 9 tight ends?
Yep.
That's a lot. 6 quarterbacks is a lot.
Yep.
Okay? But I focused in on that running back situation because that was the core of the triple option. Was running. Having, one guy goes down, the next one comes in. It's not necessarily about how talented you are. It's about being able to run the scheme.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting. I don't expect us to come off the gas, but as we do, and you just mentioned, we get a lot of guys playing time. I do expect by middle of the third quarter for them to start to rotate in the backups if it hasn't been done already. By the end of the game, I expect to see walk-ons getting some time. That's quite frankly what that's what I envision will happen.
Well, I mean, again, I think the spreads are overblown. So many people believe that's game prediction. They don't, many people just forget the fact that it is based off of the betting lines and for Vegas to make money. But this is one of those examples where that makes sense. I mean, I believe last I saw the spread was about 36.5. I don't know what it's at right now, but I think that's legitimate. So I think we are looking at that. And keep in mind too, this will be an interesting part is, I mean, I look at Colin's resume. He is a defensive coach by nature, was a coordinator at Florida International and then at Mississippi State through 2014. He was in those. He was a defensive coordinator at Florida for McElwain. Hard to judge that because the McElwain, as many Florida fans will tell you, was an ugly coaching time for them. So, but they did. Florida during that time was not very good, but did put together some solid defenses with some less than spectacular offenses. So, he's got some. He's got some chops there. Did well, relatively speaking, at Temple, obviously, which is what gave him the opportunity at Tech. So I think it'll be interesting to watch how this plays out. You want to really prepare your kids. That you got to get them as confident as you possibly can. But I think, in the scheme of things, you're right. I think this is likely we are going to be seeing some backups and some walk-ons playing at the end of this game if it plays out accordingly. I think the real key for Clemson, and I'll state this, and then I'll kind of turn it back to you to talk more about the team. But the real fact is, one, stay healthy in this game. Mm-hmm. Stay healthy. Mm-hmm. That is always a fear of the old Paul Johnson teams. Your defensive line walked away with more bumps and bruises from all, like you said, the cut blocking and all that. It was ugly. So if they decide to play some of that style of football, you want to remain healthy because they need to go into the A&M game healthy. But more importantly, I will say this, talking about health, they need to come out of the Texas A&M game healthy. So the worst thing you can have is have injuries in the Tech game because I'll let you kind of go into this a little bit, but certainly one of the more challenging games you got in the conference is going to be playing Syracuse after a big game like A&M.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me this. I want to know a little bit more about this Clemson team. Again, I think we know the offense pretty well, but I want to talk about this defense. Tell me who your new rising stars are, and then what you think from a player unit standpoint is the strongest on that defense.
All right. So from rising star, and he already started to have his star shine. I mentioned him earlier. And we're going to call him the X-Man. Number 3, Xavier Thomas. He is a true sophomore, only because he got some time. Despite having all those great D-linemen, he got his time. Why? He is a man among boys. He was, I think, the number 1 recruit when he came out of IMG a few years back. If not, he was top 3. And the guy manhandles people on the defensive end. He is incredible. The world will know Xavier Thomas by the end of this year. Some say, a lot of the people that have watched him, Clemson people, have said he could be the best defensive end we've ever had. There's a lot. That's a lot.
Yep.
We had Shaq Lawson. We had Vic Beasley. Shit, we had Gaines Adams.
Yeah.
We've had some good D linemen. And some good DNs at that. They say he could be the best.
And you had a few drafted,
Absolutely.
last year.
Absolutely. In the middle, we will have Niles Pinckney at D tackle. He got time last year. Niles is a grad student, but he's built like a brick shit house. I mean, he's 6'1", 295, so he's not the biggest D tackle. Neither was Gravy Jarrett.
Yep.
Okay, it's about leverage with these guys. They've got leverage and power.
It's kind of an Aaron Donald size right there.
Yeah, he's really good. And if you don't know, he's number 44. He had made a couple plays in the national championship as well. So you got to remember, Dexter Lawrence was suspended for the college football playoff and for the national championship. So these guys got some time.
Sure.
His counterpart in the middle will be Jordan Williams. Jordan's been with us. He's a sophomore now, red shirt. But he's 6'4", 310, and he's really good. You're going to get to know Jordan really quickly. And the other D tackle that you should know is a redshirt junior, Xavier Kelly. Xavier had a car accident in past years that kind of dinged him up, so he wasn't able to play. He's from Wichita, Kansas. Another, talk about us getting nationwide with our recruits. I mean, I don't remember the last time we plucked someone from Kansas. This guy was the number 1 recruit out of Kansas when we got him. So he's really good.
I don't know that many teams could say who they plucked out of Kansas.
No, not at all. Now, on the other side at the end, we'll probably start our redshirt sophomore, Logan Rudolph. And I remember when Logan did one, because these kids now do their video commitment videos for recruiting. And I remember watching his, and he was out in like the forest chopping trees, like with his shirt off, this big white lumberjack kid chopping trees. Love that. This kid he could be really good. And behind him and Xavier at the end, man, I mean, where do you want to go? Justin Foster is a junior, true, 6'2", 265. He's awesome. One of the top DNs in the country we picked up the same year as Xavier Thomas was KJ Henry. He's right here he's from Winston-Salem. He got time last year. We redshirted him, so he's actually a redshirt freshman, 6'4", 250. Animal. He is an animal. Behind that, Justin Maskell. We got him right up the road from Snellville, Georgia. 6'3", 260 redshirt freshman. Badass. The list goes. I'm looking at these guys, and I'm just like, wow, I forgot about this guy. I forgot about this guy.
Do you think that's going to be your strongest position group?
No.
Okay.
I think it'll be strong. Our defensive backfield, our secondary, will be awesome. Awesome. The guy that made the pick right out the gates against Bama is coming back. A.J. Terrell. Isaiah Simmons is coming back. Those guys are awesome. Now, we lose Travion Mullen to the draft. He was our number one. He was number one. He was also our our number one corner. Andrew Booth, true freshman, Decula, Georgia.
The old Decula.
One of the top recruits in the nation. Came in early enrollee in spring camp. Throwing him out there with the first team against Justin Ross, T. Higgins, and Amari Rogers. We know who they are. Shutting them down. They say this kid is incredible and could quite possibly start right out the gate. And right with him, we have another guy that we brought in this year, Sheridan Jones, another cornerback. Incredible. So that's just a couple of names. We know Isaiah, we know AJ, and you will probably see one of them drop down to linebacker, quite frankly, because we did lose some people there. We have studs there that can fill the gaps. I'm not worried about it. Jamie Skalski is really good and got a lot of playing time last year. You still have guys on the back end. Again, like I said, we've got a lot of experience, but we could drop some of these guys like Isaiah down from safety to linebacker.
Which is, talking about college football, that's getting more and more common with the passing games now, is taking those thumper safeties and kind of making them tweeners, whether people call them star positions.
Jabril Peppers.
Very, very, very common and really necessary, because you need to be able to stand up against the run against some of these, but at the same time, you've got to be able to cover. It's not the days of covering the lumbering tight end anymore. You're covering some heavy receivers. You're covering more athletic tight ends. Some of these kids are getting out of basketball that can jump out of the gym. So these guys become more and more, as those other positions evolve, they become more critical. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and some other guys that, to keep an eye on in that backfield. Mario Goodrich is a sophomore. Got him out of Missouri, really good. One of the Herb Street boys have come to Clemson.
The Herbie Juniors.
They are walk-ons. But Jake Herbstreet's a corner coming in. Could be interesting there. Also, Hall of Famer.
You got size on him? I'm just curious.
Yeah, he's not big. He's 5'11", 170.
Okay.
You got Hall of Fame Clemson Tiger Brian Dawkins. His son is with us. We've had him for a few years. Brian Dawkins Jr. He's a little guy. He's 5'7".
What is he playing?
He's a corner.
He's a corner. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But he's got a lot of speed and he can hit.
Well, so can his dad.
Yeah, the biggest thing that as a Clemson fan, that I'm interested in seeing from the defense, more so, as I said, if the group of our secondary is the strength of our defense. Mr. South Carolina 2 years ago, his senior year in high school, Darion Kendrick, my man DK. He was a backup wide receiver, because obviously we're loaded, but he got plenty of playing time. He was one of our main return men in the punt game last year. Okay? They've moved him to cornerback. He could possibly play both ways, but they've moved him to get some time at cornerback, and apparently he is out of control. Now, in high school, he was a quarterback, and he was a cornerback. So, quarterback for the team. But as we do see in high school, these guys play two ways, especially the best players. On defense, he was a cornerback, so he has experience. Speed out the yin-yang. I'm telling you, he's from Rock Hill, South Carolina. He is an athlete of epic proportions, real fast. So I'm very interested in to see if DK is going to get the start in the secondary, or how they're going to use him there.
All right, so let me say this. I'm sitting across from the, what is it called? What was that commercial? The Squatty Potty, where little rainbows came out of your poop? So
Yeah, one of those.
the commercial.
Yeah.
So I listen, as a football fan, I am and someone that watches all games. It's very legitimate, the hype that Clemson has. It's well earned. Even without playing a game, like I said, the recruiting and the fact that a lot of these guys got experience justifies your confidence for the year. But I do want to talk about a couple of areas that would be of challenge for Clemson. So I guess the first question I have for you is, who are the teams, if you're going to drop a loss this year, who are the teams you believe you can afford to and still get to the playoff?
Nobody. No, I can't. I think we've built a reputation, and by our past work, that if we do drop a loss, but we still win the ACC, we're going to get consideration. And that's just because of what we've built with the program. It's a tough one. I guess I would have to say A&M.
Okay.
Just because it's at a conference. So is South Carolina at the end of the year, but that's our rival. You don't want that.
And you don't want to lose late. That changes opinions quick.
You don't want to lose late. And the reason I say that is the past 3 years, every year that we've made it to the playoff, there has been that game during the season, usually midway, maybe just a hair past that is the turning point for our season. I don't want to say complacent prior to that game, but sometimes you feel don't be surprised if we get off to a slow start tonight. We do that. And as Clemson fans, you kind of are like, are we worth it this year? And then all of a sudden we start to build and build and build. And the great thing is Coach has a plan to build. It's phases. And when we get to the cusp of the postseason, we are in championship phase. So we do build into that. So I guess if we were to drop a game, I would say it would be to A&M. It's the second game of the year. We do have to go on the road the following week to Syracuse, and that's kind of why I say that. I'd rather be able to have that loss there and turn us on real early and then go take it to Syracuse, because going to Syracuse to play in the Carrier Dome is not going to be easy for us. They're the team that seems to have our number. Quite frankly, Dino Babers is a great coach, I feel like. He's great for our conference. He's done great things with that program. They have some really good players. Moreover, they're not always 4 or 5 star there either, but he finds guys in that region of the country that are athletes, and he coaches them up very well. But I don't want to lose any game this year.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this. The interesting thing for Clemson, you're right, they got the name recognition, and I think just with the sheer talent, that's going to afford them some grace in a situation like that other teams wouldn't get. But you do have right now, I'll use Phil Steele's, but it's generally in the area in the 60s rating for strength of schedule.
Okay.
Again, I don't think that's the kiss of death for a loss, but it certainly plays upon that fact. And, but I also go to, and it's just like the NFL, they talk about strength of schedule, but strength of schedule tends to change as the year gets played on by how teams,
right. I mean,
regress.
We don't get much love in football. I mean, we do as the Tigers, but the conference as a whole usually doesn't. It's going to take, honestly, I think for that to happen more, it's going to take your boys to come back to fruition. It's going to take the Seminoles to come back to fruition. And, I think then we'll have.
I think it takes even more than that, but I agree. There has to be, in my mind, we've got to put out there where we have teams that have no more than 3 losses. You got to have 3-4 teams doing that, and I think again that's the only way you're going to take over the SEC in that manner. So yeah, I agree. So kind of just wrapping it up. On this Clemson side, again, it's hard to poke holes in the team, which kind of makes this conversation a little bit thin, and just because how strong they are. But I guess what is your I want to get this on two ends. What is your confidence level on an undefeated ACC season, and what's your confidence level? You can give me a percentage on an undefeated entire season. Ooh.
If I were to, you asked me which one, if we were to drop a game, who it would be, and as I said, Texas A&M. The reality is the game that worries me the most is Syracuse at the Carrier Dome. That worries me the most. So if you ask me, I think
confidence level of going undefeated in the ACC?
I give it a 90 to 95%.
Okay.
And I'd have to give it the same overall. I have to, because the game that in my mind I am concerned about is that Syracuse game. So it's kind of one and the same when you're tying overall. The reason I say that is because I don't think we're going to lose to Texas A&M. They're coming to our house. Last year we had to go there, and honestly, if we didn't have Kelly Bryant, we might not have won that game. Trevor, it was his first big game in a hostile environment. He didn't start, but he didn't look good when he got in, and it took Kelly to get us that game, to get the victory for that game. I think that's motivation for Trevor. I mean, you're talking about a guy who just won the national championship. You know, I mean, he's on cloud nine. They're talking about he could have been the first player drafted in the NFL if he went out, if he was eligible this year. He's the best quarterback in college football. He's a Heisman candidate. You got to find motivation. Our coaching staff does a great job of keeping our guys grounded and feeding them that fodder. But personally, that kid knows. And here's the other, and I'll couple that with Syracuse, is when he got the starting job, got knocked out. So the good thing about going to Syracuse is I think he's going to be motivated for those. That's our season in my mind. Not tonight, but the next 2 weeks, how we perform in those games could be our season. And I think that the way Trevor performed in those games last year were probably his worst games of the year. And that is going to be straight motivation for the kid. I think he's good. Honestly, people are talking about Kellen Mond as a potential sleeper this year. And I think that Trevor is going to come out in that game at home in the Valley. We have game day tonight, so I can't imagine they'll do that next week. There's too many big games on the slate anyways. Texas LSU is next week. There's a few of them. I'll have to look it up. But he's going to come out ready to play. It'll probably end up being an evening game, and Trevor's going to come out ready to ball. So to wrap your questions, answer all in one, like I said, I think I give it about a 90 to 95% that will go undefeated on both sides. Because if we do take a loss, unfortunately, I think it's going to be to Syracuse. And I hate that, because if they don't, then we're not in control of our own destiny. And I hate that.
Yeah. I think, it's hard for this to be a really exciting segment because I think Clemson has done such a great job of legitimizing their expectations. I mean, we're not talking about a team that just won the national championship last year. We're talking about a team that's played in the playoff. How many years in a row are we now? 4? I think it's 4 years in a row they played in the playoffs. So we're not. There's just not as much unknown as you might expect in some of these situations, and I definitely look forward to it. This is why you play the games, though, is it's no guarantee. So it'll be fun to watch and see how they do. Be interesting to see Tech and how Tech adapts tonight. Again, not expecting a win out of there, but it'll be neat to see what he does with it too. So there's a little bit of intrigue there too as well. So I think we're going to wrap up this portion of it here.
Before we do.
Oh, he has something
Before we do, just real quick, one thing I am excited about seeing, because I know we will get some backups in there. We have 2 of the top 3 wide receiver recruits in the country that came to us this year as true freshmen. 6'3", 215 from Folsom, California, Joseph Nada, and The other kid is 6'3", 195 from Miami, Florida, Frank Ladson Jr. I look out for these guys. Ladson will be number 2, and Nada will be number 10. Look out for these guys tonight when they get some time on the field. They are supposed to be studs. The last guy I'm very interested in seeing, I'm assuming he's going to get the nod as our starter at tight end. He got suspended at that end of last year. He was a part of the whole thing with Dex, is Braden Galloway. 6'4", 240, true sophomore from Anderson. He's a stud. I mean, if he gets it on, then we have another weapon that we've been able to use the past few years at tight end, but not like back when we had a Dwayne Allen or even a Jordan Leggett. So I'm excited to see if we get that production out of tight end like we've had in years past. So those are guys I'm excited about seeing.
Yeah, your biggest problem might be you might not have enough footballs.
There you go. There you go. All right, we're going to wrap it. We're going to try to get this up today so that y'all can listen to it before the game starts. And we'll talk a little bit more in our next segment, in our next podcast, about previewing this weekend's week 1 of college football.